They abandoned me in a box when I was 13. Finally, I found some answers. At the age of 13, Robin was abandoned in a box on London's Oxford Street. Being now a 74-year-old man, he spent all his life wondering who left him and why. Thanks to a DNA test and the diligent work of one of his daughters, he finally finds some important answers. One day, Robin King was prying among his parents' things and found his adoption papers in a hold-all. This news affected him deep down and he ran away from home. Along with his friend, they cycled from London to Southend, where they were sleeping in a tent till the moment the police had found them. My friend's mom had to pay for us to come back on the train, Robin recalls. When he came back home, nobody even mentioned the fact Robin was adopted. I was afraid of raising it as I didn't want any confrontation, the man said. Fred and Elsie King were Robin's adoptive parents who brought him up. They lived in a poor part of Woolwich in South London. It was just the end of World War II and Robin's earliest memories were playing bomb sites and his mother cleaning the rich people's homes. After finishing school with few qualifications, the boy went off the rails for a while. But it hadn't been long. In his 20s, he got married, had 2 daughters and moved to Peterborough, where he started working as a town planner and later as an architect. I'd never have gotten to where I did today without my family. I really love my 2 girls. They were the only people with a biological connection to me, Robin says. In a while, Robin decided to apply for a passport for work. That's when he heard surprising news from an official working in the passport office. I was asked my age, then the man said, "I don't think it'll bother you too much to learn that you were abandoned at the Peter Robinson store in London." Being an adult, Robin found out he was a foundling and why his second name was Peter. Only in his 50s, Robin made the next effort to discover more about his past. With his daughter Michaela, he headed to the London Metropolitan Archive to take a look at his full adoption record. Thanks to it, he found out that he'd been found outside the Oxford Circus department store on 20th October 1943. Even though the Blitz had been over, it was dangerous to be in London since there were still sporadic attacks by the Luftwaffe. 10 days before Robin was found, 30 tons of bombs had been dropped on the capital. When being 4.5 years old, the boy was adopted by the Kings. They were deeply grateful to the authorities for giving them such a good little boy, yet there were no answers as to why they'd left him. Efforts to trace any relative of the child have not been successful, one document stated. Robin's daughter Lorraine decided not to give up and for the next 20 years had written to every TV show she could think of that reunited families or solved mysteries. Everybody said the same: if you don't know the parents' names, there's nothing to carry on. Then she found a library archivist to examine the spools of microfilm with the hope to find any mention of a foundling in old newspapers. She also wrote to the Arcadia Group, which was in charge of the Peter Robinson store, in case the archives could help her find something. "I used to have moments of inspiration when I thought, I know, I'll write to so-and-so," Lorraine says. Once she watched the One Show on BBC One episode that features a man who was a people-tracing expert. His name was Cat Wideaway. I contacted Cat explaining my dad's situation. A few weeks later, she told me she'd met someone who she thought she could help, a DNA detective called Julia Bell. Julia had found her own American GI grandfather using a DNA test and genealogical research. "My mother had been left with so many questions, and this answered some of them and gave her a great sense of peace," Julia says. "I believe everyone deserves to know who they really are." Since that, she'd started helping other people track down their relatives. Julia sent off Robin's saliva test to 3 consumer DNA databases: Ancestry, 23andMe, and Family Tree DNA. "We had lots of theories when we started. Lots of people told me I looked American and we thought maybe I was a GI baby. But they weren't over here in 1943, Robin says. Soon the 23andMe results had found a DNA match. She was called Maria in New York. I thought, well, that's it, we've done it, Lorraine says. But everything wasn't as simple as seemed at the first glance. Maria and Robin shared only 1% of DNA, thus they had to be second or third cousins. We contacted Maria and she agreed to collaborate to create a full family tree going back several generations to her 16 great-great-grandparents, Julia says. Their big goal was to bring these lines down to more recent times to find Robin's parents. Imagine for a second, if their great-great-grandparents and their descendants had just 2 children each, there would be 224 people who could probably be one of Robin's biological parents. We had no idea who would be the shared ancestor on the family tree. It's like the children's puzzle when you have to work out which is the right path that leads to the pot of gold, Lorraine says. Julia and Lorraine did their best to reconstruct the family tree. Results from Ancestry supposed Robin had a strong Scottish-Irish connection. I was working on it every night like someone possessed. Every time I had a breakthrough, I'd get excited and it spurred me on, Lorraine recalls. After a year of dead ends, the team found a woman called Agnes who'd been born in Scotland and died in Canada. Lorraine had a strong hunch it could have been Robin's mother. She found a phone of Agnes's son and rang him one Sunday afternoon, explaining she was researching her father's mother. He said, "That's really strange because when my mom got Alzheimer's, she started talking as if she'd had another baby and would talk to me like I was that baby." Grant took a DNA test and the results showed he was Robin's full brother, which meant they shared both parents. "I cried when Julia told me, I just couldn't believe it," Lorraine says. The man told that Robin's parents were Douglas and Agnes Jones. Douglas was in the Royal Canadian Air Force and had met and married Agnes in Glasgow. After the war, they moved to Canada and Douglas started working as a psychologist. There were 3 children in the family aside Robin: Karen, Grant, and their daughter Peggy. When hearing the news, Robin was a bit upset and surprised to discover that he was conceived before his parents got married in December 1942. "If they didn't want me, why didn't they just give me up for adoption?" he asks. "It just doesn't make sense to me." Unfortunately, Robin can't hear the answers from his parents as Douglas Jones passed away in 1975 and Agnes in 2014. "I feel like it was an opportunity lost. I could have gone over to meet her if I could," Robin says, regretting. "I can see how Agnes and Douglas couldn't see a way of coping with war and a baby so early in their marriage, but I can't understand how you could leave a baby in central London, which was such a dangerous place at the time." A few months ago, Karen, Robin's oldest sister, told him that their parents had said something about an earlier baby who had been stillborn. Meanwhile, Lorraine found Agnes's half-brother Brian, who lives in Scotland. He has an absolutely different story. Agnes had had a baby and decided to give it up for adoption to a childless Air Force couple. At the time, it was common to simply agree to hand the child over to another. Julie is convinced that Robin had been abandoned by mistake. She'd come across such a scenario oodles of times while working as an amateur detective. Imagine you've steeled yourself and no one shows at the meeting place. You're not gonna go back with a baby, it's gonna have to be left, she says. Lorraine states this version could puzzle out some aspects of their story. "Apparently my grandma was a lovely lady, a homely mom and really nice," she says, which makes it hard to understand why she'd ever do something like leave a baby. There is a birth certificate which states Robin was born on the 10th of October at a maternity unit in Winchester. Lorraine suggests that if Agnes wanted to leave her baby, she'd probably have given her birth at home in order to prevent a lot of official problems. Yet some details left confusing. The couple registered the baby's birth 2 weeks after leaving him while providing his father's service number. They also gave their baby their family name, Brian after Agnes's half-brother and Douglas after his father. Even though Robin and Lorraine had found their family, they still desperately wanted to find the answers to why he was left. Thus, they made an appeal on BBC's Jeremy Vine show on Radio 2. "We thought someone might have had a family history of finding a baby in London during the war," Lorraine says. "It got our search out to more people, but sadly didn't lead to anything." Nevertheless, the BBC actually helped. They dug up that in 1941, 200 Oxford Street, which was part of Peter Robinson's department store, had been taken over by the BBC's Overseas Service. Their staff, including the writer George Orwell, made regular radio broadcasts during the war. Trevor Hill, 92 at that time, was a junior program engineer there. He remembers a baby wrapped in a blanket in a box close to the doors. "I worked at 200 Oxford Street and I do remember the baby in the box," he says. "I did home guard duty for the BBC, so when I saw the box I was slightly worried. We weren't allowed to leave deliveries or anything lying around because of security." When security went to check the box, they found Robin. The men thought the child's home might have been bombed and the mother had left it in despair. This happened a lot during the war. Recently, Robin and Trevor met near the place Trevor found Robin 74 years ago. "It's been a terrific experience to find someone who saw me at that time of life," Robin says. A few weeks ago, there was one more portion of information from Canada. It was a copy of Robin's father's war record that revealed the fact that in October 1943, Douglas, a corporal, was an instructor at No. 7 Radio School in South Kensington. He was on vacation for the week before Robin was born on October 10th and for 4 days after his birth. Nevertheless, when Robin was found abandoned on Wednesday 20th of October, he was back at work. It's highly possible Douglas was present when Robin was registered as Brian Jones. His leave was from 5th to 7th of November, while Robin was registered on the 6th. Lorraine and Robin think that Julia's hypothesis that an informal adoption went wrong might really be correct. Yet there's still the possibility that Douglas left the baby on purpose while telling friends and family the baby had been adopted. Nobody knows the truth. But they are really happy about the answers they've already found. "It means a lot to find out what my dad's real name would have been and when he was actually born," Lorraine says. In fact, Robin has been celebrating his birthday 4 days earlier than the real date. He was born on October 10th, not on the 6th. Robin doesn't know whether he'll change his birthday, but he definitely won't change his name. The man's getting used to the fact that he's not English as he always thought, but half Scottish and half Canadian. Robin's happy about everything that happened. It's astounding to see what Lorraine did through trial and error. but there are certain things I'll never know about my past.